There is a profound truth that lies at the heart of human achievement, one that has been whispered through the ages by those who have transcended the ordinary. It is simply this: most people live their entire lives without ever understanding the extraordinary power they already possess. The power of a single thought, held with unwavering conviction, nurtured with daily attention, and acted upon with quiet resolve. This is not speculation or wishful thinking. It is the fundamental law upon which all meaningful human progress has been built. Consider for a moment the world around you. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything that constitutes what we call modern civilization began as a thought in someone's mind. The chair you sit on, the building that shelters you, the technology that connects you to distant corners of the world. All were once nothing more than invisible impulses of electricity in the human brain. Thought is the original source of all creation. And yet, how little attention we pay to the quality and direction of our thoughts. We drift through life allowing random events to dictate our mental state, surrendering the most powerful creative force in existence to chance and circumstance. The great division in humanity is not between the haves and have-nots, or the educated and uneducated. It is between the 5% who have discovered how to direct their thinking with purpose and the 95% who remain at the mercy of their environment. The 5% are not necessarily more intelligent, more privileged, or more fortunate in their beginnings. What separates them is their understanding of a simple truth. The mind moves in the direction of its dominant thoughts, and in that principle lies the master key to an uncommon life. When we carefully observe those rare individuals who rise steadily toward their aspirations while others remain stagnant, we notice something quite remarkable. These men and women hold themselves to a different standard of thinking. They refuse to dwell in limitation. They decline the invitation to worry that most accept without question. They direct their mental energy with the precision of a skilled archer, focusing not on what they wish to avoid, but on what they intend to create. And in doing so, they activate forces that remain dormant in the lives of the many. The human mind, you see, cannot help but move toward its most dominant thought patterns. Like water flowing downhill, our lives naturally progress toward whatever occupies the center of our mental attention. This is not mysticism. It is the practical operation of our nervous system, the functioning of our reticular activating system that filters millions of bits of information, allowing in only what aligns with our deepest convictions about what is possible. The 5% have simply learned to harness this natural mechanism instead of being governed by it. Consider the remarkable story of Thomas Edison. When fire destroyed his laboratory in December 1914, destroying years of work and causing damage worth millions in today's currency, his response was not despair but anticipation. Standing amid the smoking ruins, the 67-year-old inventor said to his son, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." The next morning, Edison began rebuilding, and within 3 weeks, his team had produced their first phonograph. What distinguished Edison was not an absence of disaster, but a quality of thought that refused to be defined by circumstance. This pattern repeats throughout history. Lincoln failed in business, suffered a nervous breakdown, and lost 8 elections before becoming one of America's greatest presidents. Henry Ford went bankrupt 5 times before revolutionizing industry. Their external circumstances didn't determine their destiny, their dominant thoughts did. And what they thought about consistently, they brought into being through the natural laws of achievement. The average person, observing such examples, makes a critical error. They attribute success to luck, timing, or some special advantage they themselves lack. In doing so, they miss the fundamental principle at work. Achievement is not about circumstance, but about the quality and direction of thought maintained regardless of circumstance. The 95% wait for conditions to improve before changing their thinking. The 5% understand that conditions change only after thinking changes. Your life at this very moment is moving in the direction of your most persistent thoughts and deepest beliefs. If you find yourself repeating patterns that frustrate your ambitions, look not to external factors but to the thoughts you nurture, day after day. Your mind is like fertile soil, It does not judge what seeds are planted within it. It simply grows whatever is there with perfect impartiality. Plant doubt, fear, and limitation, and you will harvest their fruits in abundance. Plant vision, determination, and expectancy, and these too will multiply. The starting point of all achievement is the development of a clear picture of what you wish to create. Not a vague notion, not a passing fancy, but a definite, precise vision held steadily in mind. The 5% understand that clarity is power. When the destination is clearly defined, the journey, though challenging, becomes a matter of navigation rather than aimless wandering. Most people live with only the haziest notion of what they truly want, then wonder why their efforts yield inconsistent results. In my years of studying human achievement, I've observed that most people spend more time planning a 2-week vacation than designing the next 5 years of their lives. This is the thinking of the 95%. The 5% approach life with the understanding that time will pass regardless of how they use it. 5 years from now will arrive. The only question is where you will be standing when it does. Will you be 5 years closer to your highest vision? Or will you simply be 5 years older? The development of purpose is not a luxury reserved for the privileged few. It is the fundamental requirement for a life of meaning and direction. Without it, we become like ships without rudders, driven by winds of circumstance, arriving at destinations we neither chose nor desired. The 5% understand that purpose is not something you discover under a rock or receive in a moment of dramatic revelation. It develops through honest self-examination, through identifying the contribution you are best equipped to make, and through aligning your daily activities with that understanding. Consider how different life becomes when governed by purpose, rather than circumstance. The same challenges that defeat others become opportunities for growth. The same obstacles that discourage the many become stepping stones for the few. Not because the challenges themselves are different, but because purpose transforms how they are perceived and addressed. Without purpose, difficulty appears as a signal to retreat. With purpose, it becomes merely information about what must be overcome. Let me share with you the story of a young immigrant who arrived in America with only $5 in his pocket and unable to speak English. Conventional thinking would predict a life of struggle and limitation. But this young man carried something more valuable than money or language skills. He carried a purpose that transcended circumstance. That purpose was to create tools that would help people build better lives. His name was Andrew Carnegie, and he went on to become one of the greatest industrialists and philanthropists in American history, eventually giving away what would amount to billions in today's currency. What set him apart was not advantageous circumstances, but advantageous thinking, the hallmark of the 5%. Purpose provides the critical element missing from most attempts at achievement: persistence in the face of temporary defeat. Without it, we abandon our highest aspirations at the first sign of resistance. With it, we develop the capacity to push through difficulties that would stop others completely. The 5% understand that any worthwhile achievement will be guarded by challenges proportional to its value. They expect resistance not as evidence of a flawed path, but as confirmation they are moving towards something significant. This understanding transforms how we relate to the inevitable challenges of life. The average person avoids difficulty, seeing it as something to escape. The achiever recognizes difficulty as the necessary conditioning that builds capacity for greater accomplishment. Just as physical muscles develop only through the resistance of weight training, mental and emotional capacity grows only through confronting and overcoming obstacles. The 5% don't wish for fewer problems. They focus on developing greater capacity to solve them. Responsibility is another cornerstone of how the 5% think. While the masses are quick to identify external factors that limit their progress, the achiever accepts complete ownership of their circumstances. This is not blind optimism or denial of real challenges. It is strategic positioning. By claiming responsibility, you simultaneously claim power. What you own, you can change. What you attribute to forces beyond your control, you cannot. Consider how differently two people might respond to an economic downturn. The first says, This recession has ruined my opportunities. There's nothing to be done until conditions improve. The second says, within these changed conditions lie new opportunities for those prepared to adapt and solve emerging problems. Same circumstance, radically different interpretation. The first stance renders one helpless. The second empowers action regardless of external conditions. This perspective on responsibility extends to every area of life. In relationships, the 5% ask not, why don't others understand me? But, how can I communicate more effectively? In career advancement, not why haven't I been given better opportunities? But how can I create more value where I am now? In personal finances, not why can't I afford what I want? But how can I increase my value to others such that income naturally expands? Each reframing shifts from passive waiting to active creation. The quality of your life ultimately depends on the quality of your decisions, not the conditions you were born into, not the actions of others, not the trends of the economy, but the countless choices you make each day, both large and small. The 5% recognize that while we cannot control every circumstance, we maintain absolute authority over our responses to those circumstances. And in that response lies our true power and freedom. Most people make decisions based primarily on immediate comfort rather than long-term fulfillment. They choose what is easy over what is effective. They retreat from short-term discomfort even when it leads toward their stated goals. The 5% reverse this equation, understanding that temporary inconvenience is often the price of lasting achievement. They make decisions not based on what feels good in the moment, but on what aligns with their highest vision for themselves. Decision-making of this caliber requires mental clarity that most never develop. The average mind is cluttered with conflicting desires, social programming, fears, and outdated beliefs that cloud judgment. The achiever's mind, by contrast, is organized around principles and priorities, enabling decisions that may appear difficult to others, but are actually obvious when working from a clear internal framework. This clarity is not accidental. It is cultivated through regular reflection, through questioning assumptions, and through measuring choices against purpose rather than convenience. Consistency is where most aspirations wither and die. The 95% are capable of occasional excellence, but unable to sustain the daily disciplines that build toward extraordinary outcomes. They operate on inspiration rather than commitment, taking action when feeling motivated but retreating when that initial enthusiasm naturally wanes. The 5% understand that all meaningful achievement comes through the compound effect of small actions performed consistently over time. Consider the metaphor of the bamboo farmer. For 4 years after planting, he sees virtually no visible growth from his efforts. He waters, weeds, and tends soil that appears to yield nothing. Then suddenly, in the 5th year, the bamboo shoots upward, growing up to 90 feet in a single season. The untrained observer might marvel at this overnight success, missing entirely the 4 years of invisible development that made it possible. This is how most significant achievement operates, invisible growth preceding visible results. This principle of consistent, accumulated effort applies universally. The writer who produces pages daily eventually completes the book that the occasional writer never finishes. The investor who regularly sets aside funds regardless of market conditions ultimately creates wealth that the sporadic investor cannot match. The artist who practices their craft in daily discipline develops mastery that the intermittent enthusiast never approaches. The 5% understand that consistency, more than talent or fortune, determines outcomes. Learning is the accelerant of achievement. While the masses believe education ends with formal schooling, the 5% maintain a lifelong commitment to growth. They understand that what you know today, while perhaps sufficient for your current position, is inadequate for where you intend to go. The world belongs to those who continuously expand their understanding, develop new capacities, and adapt to changing conditions. The average person approaches learning passively, absorbing whatever information happens to cross their path. The achiever approaches learning strategically, identifying specific knowledge and skills that advance their purpose, then pursuing those areas with intention. They recognize that in an age of unlimited information, the ability to focus on what matters most becomes the crucial skill. They ask not what's interesting, but what's essential for where I'm going. This commitment to learning manifests not just in formal study, but in how one approaches daily experience. The 5% extract lessons from every situation, whether success or setback. They conduct regular reviews of their progress, analyzing what's working and what isn't. They seek feedback that others avoid. They expose themselves to perspectives that challenge rather than merely confirm their existing views. In short, they transform ordinary experience into extraordinary education through the quality of their attention. The capacity for effective action distinguishes achievement from mere intention. The 95% are full of good ideas and noble aspirations that never materialize into tangible results. The 5% convert thought into reality through disciplined execution. They understand that the world rewards completed work, not perfect plans. They recognize that action, even when imperfect, provides the feedback necessary for improvement, while planning alone keeps one trapped in theoretical ideals. This orientation toward action doesn't mean reckless motion or busy work. It means purposeful movement toward defined objectives. The achiever develops the habit of taking the next logical step, regardless of whether they can see the entire path. They understand that clarity comes through engagement, not contemplation alone. Like someone walking at night with a flashlight that illuminates only the ground immediately ahead, they trust that continuing forward will gradually reveal the way. Fear stops most people from taking the actions they know would advance their lives. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. These become the invisible prison walls that confine potential. The 5% experience these same fears but respond differently. They recognize fear not as a command to retreat but as a signal that something important lies ahead. They develop the capacity to act in the presence of fear rather than waiting for fear to subside. This ability to move forward despite uncertainty and discomfort comes not from extraordinary courage but from proper perspective. The achiever weighs not just the risk of action but the certainty of regret that comes from inaction. They consider not just the potential for immediate failure, but the guaranteed failure that comes from never trying. They recognize that comfort and growth never coexist, and they choose growth. Direction determines destination. This simple truth escapes the 95% who expect different results while traveling the same familiar paths. The 5% recognize that if your current direction doesn't align with your desired destination, no amount of speed or effort will get you there. They regularly pause to ensure their daily activities are moving them toward their highest priorities, rather than merely keeping them busy. Consider how most people plan their days. They respond to whatever appears most urgent, complete whatever tasks seem most pressing, handle whatever issues arise most loudly. By day's end, they've been busy, perhaps exhausted, but have moved no closer to their most meaningful goals. The 5% reverse this approach. They identify their highest priorities first, then allocate their finest hours and best energy to these areas before lesser matters consume their resources. This principle of direction before velocity applies equally to career decisions, financial choices, relationship investments, and personal development. The achiever asks not, "How can I do more?" but "How can I ensure what I'm doing matters most?" They understand that effectiveness trumps efficiency, that doing the right things imperfectly creates better outcomes than doing the wrong things flawlessly. The capacity to delay gratification, to forego immediate pleasure in service of future fulfillment, separates the 5% from the masses more reliably than any other factor. The average person makes choices based primarily on what feels good now. The achiever makes choices based on what creates the life they truly desire. This simple shift in decision-making alters everything. Consider two individuals with identical resources. The first spends freely on whatever catches their interest, enjoys immediate pleasures, and borrows against future earnings to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. The second lives below their means, invests the difference, and channels resources toward assets rather than indulgences. 20 years later, their positions will have dramatically diverged, not because of different starting points, but because of different decisions compounded over time. This principle extends beyond finances to every area of life. The one who exercises regularly while others seek comfort, who develops skills while others seek entertainment, who builds relationships while others seek convenience. This person isn't denying themselves pleasure. They're simply pursuing a deeper satisfaction that requires patience to obtain. The 5% understand that the richest rewards in life rarely come in the moment of action but in the harvest that follows. Environment shapes achievement in ways most fail to recognize. The 95% allow themselves to be surrounded by whatever influences happen to be present: negative news, complaining colleagues, mindless entertainment, then wonder why their thoughts remain fixed on limitation. The 5% curate their environment with intention, understanding that what surrounds you ultimately enters you. This environmental design includes the information you consume, the conversations you participate in, the people with whom you associate most closely, and the physical spaces you inhabit. Each element either reinforces your highest aspirations or subtly undermines them. The achiever treats these factors not as neutral background but as active ingredients in their mental diet, eliminating what diminishes and increasing what elevates. Of all environmental factors, none impacts your trajectory more powerfully than your associations. The 5 people with whom you spend the most time will shape your thinking, your expectations, your beliefs about what's possible more than any other external influence. The 5% surround themselves not with those who make them comfortable in mediocrity, but with those who inspire them toward excellence. They seek mentors ahead of where they stand, peers who share their commitment to growth, and opportunities to contribute to those still developing. Beliefs form the invisible architecture of achievement. What you deeply believe possible or impossible, deserved or undeserved, available or unavailable to someone like you, these convictions shape your actions more powerfully than any external factor. The 95% remain largely unconscious of their limiting beliefs, attributing the resulting limitations to reality rather than perception. The 5% actively examine and reconstruct their beliefs, understanding that internal constraints precede external constraints. The achiever recognizes that beliefs are not immutable facts but learned interpretations that can be deliberately reconstructed. They approach their own mental models with curiosity rather than certainty, asking not, "Is this true?" but, "Is this useful?" They understand that many so-called truths are merely assumptions that have never been properly tested, and they develop the courage to challenge these assumptions through action. This willingness to question limiting beliefs distinguishes the extraordinary from the ordinary. When most people encounter evidence that contradicts their existing views, they reject the evidence. The 5% welcome such contradictions as opportunities to refine their understanding and expand their possibilities. They recognize that growth requires the humility to acknowledge when current beliefs no longer serve their highest aspirations. The ability to maintain perspective amid life's inevitable challenges separates those who ultimately succeed from those who surrender their dreams. The 95% magnify temporary setbacks into permanent defeats, interpreting obstacles as evidence they should abandon their course. The 5% maintain the longer view, recognizing that achievement is never a straight line, but always a process of advancement and temporary retreat, of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. This capacity for perspective comes from historical understanding. Study any significant achievement in business, art, science, athletics, or personal development, and you'll discover periods of apparent failure that preceded breakthrough. Edison's thousands of unsuccessful attempts before creating a functional light bulb, Lincoln's repeated electoral defeats before the presidency, Disney's bankruptcy before building his entertainment empire. The 5% draw confidence from these examples, understanding that temporary defeat is not just common on the path to achievement, it is necessary. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. The 95% ask questions that reinforce limitation. Why does this always happen to me? Who's to blame? Why bother trying? The 5% ask questions that reveal opportunity. What can I learn from this? How can I use this situation? What would make this challenge worthwhile? The difference in outcomes begins with this difference in inquiry. Questions direct attention, and attention directs energy. When you consistently ask yourself disempowering questions, You train your mind to notice evidence that supports discouragement. When you discipline yourself to ask empowering questions, you redirect your focus toward possibilities rather than problems. The achiever develops the habit of constructive questioning until it becomes as natural as breathing. The ability to maintain positive expectancy, to believe in favorable outcomes despite temporary evidence to the contrary, is perhaps the most distinctive quality of the 5%. The average person allows their expectations to rise or fall based on immediate circumstances, becoming optimistic when things go well, and pessimistic when they don't. The achiever maintains confidence in ultimate success, regardless of current conditions, understanding that expectations often create the very results they anticipate. This isn't blind optimism or magical thinking. It's a practical recognition that what you confidently expect tends to be realized through subtle shifts in perception, decision-making, and action. When you expect positive outcomes, you notice opportunities others miss, persist when others quit, and take actions others avoid. These differences in behavior, multiplied over time, create different results that appear to confirm the original expectation, a self-fulfilling cycle that works equally well in either direction. The greatest achievements begin not with extraordinary actions but with extraordinary thinking. The 5% understand that the outer world of results reflects the inner world of thought, belief, and expectation. They direct their mental focus with the same discipline an archer uses to aim an arrow, knowing that where attention goes, energy flows, and results eventually follow. As you reflect on these principles that distinguish uncommon lives from ordinary ones, recognize that the division between the 5% and the 95% is not fixed or predetermined. It's a choice renewed each day through how you think, what you believe, and the actions you take based on those thoughts and beliefs. The door to extraordinary achievement stands open to anyone willing to adopt the thinking patterns that make it possible. Begin today by examining the quality of your dominant thoughts. Are they aligned with limitation or possibility? Do they focus on what you lack or what you can create? Do they reinforce helplessness or emphasize your capacity to influence circumstances? This single shift from reactive thinking to creative thinking initiates a transformation that affects every aspect of life. Then consider the clarity of your purpose. Not vague notions of improvement, but specific vision of what you intend to create and contribute. Purpose provides the sustaining power when motivation naturally ebbs, when obstacles arise, when the initial excitement of new endeavors fades. Without it, even the most promising beginnings eventually surrender to difficulty. Examine your daily decisions through a new lens. Ask not, what's easy, but what's effective. Not what do I feel like doing, but what does my highest vision require? Not what's comfortable now, but what creates the future I desire. Small choices consistently made from this perspective accumulate into extraordinary outcomes that appear miraculous to outside observers. Commit to continuous learning not as an occasional activity, but as a fundamental approach to life. Recognize that your current knowledge and skills, whatever their level, remain insufficient for your highest aspirations. The gap is bridged not through wishing, but through dedicated development of greater capacity. Finally, surround these commitments with environments and associations that reinforce, rather than undermine your aspirations. Seek out those who embody the qualities you wish to develop. Distance yourself from influences that pull you back toward limited thinking. Remember that transformation is not merely an individual journey, but is profoundly shaped by the context in which it unfolds. The path of the 5% is available to you this very moment. It begins not with dramatic action, but with a quiet decision. The decision to think differently than the masses, to expect differently, to respond differently to life's challenges and opportunities. This decision, renewed daily through disciplined attention to your thoughts and consistent alignment of your actions, gradually reconstructs your experience from the inside out. What separates the extraordinary from the ordinary is not genetic advantage, fortunate circumstance, or rare opportunity. It is this fundamental choice to direct your own thinking rather than accept whatever thoughts happen to arise or whatever limitations others pronounce as truth. In that choice lies the seed of an uncommon life, a life of purpose, achievement, and meaning that stands as testament to what is possible when human potential is fully engaged. The question that remains is not whether these principles work. History has demonstrated their effectiveness across diverse fields and circumstances. The question is whether you will apply them with the consistency and conviction required to transform potential into reality. The 5% are not marked by perfect execution, but by persistent recommitment to these fundamentals, even after inevitable lapses. They understand that the path to extraordinary achievement is not about perfection, but about direction maintained over time. As you close this reflection, remember that the greatest power you possess is the power to choose your thoughts. Not once, not occasionally, but moment by moment throughout each day. Exercise this power with awareness and intention, and you join the ranks of those who create rather than merely exist, who lead rather than follow, who fulfill their highest potential rather than wonder what might have been. The quiet decisions you make today about how you will think, what you will believe, and how you will respond to life's circumstances are creating your tomorrow. Choose wisely, for in those choices lies the difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one.